I am a 23-year-old female, and this happened around the time that I was 15 years old. I've had a couple encounters that have been very creepy, but this encounter had me shaken up to my core. It was my sophomore year in high school. I was going through a phase as most teenagers do. I wore short shorts most of the time and fishnets. My shirts weren't really tops that 15-year-olds should wear, but I still did. As an adult, I cringe looking back at my outfits and makeup I used to wear. I was involved in my high school color guard. We are a part of the band, except we don't play instruments. We will spin colorful flags. We also use rifles and sabers in our performances. It was fall season and we were practicing our show, doing a lot of reruns to try and perfect it before our usual competitions. Normally, practice would start at 4 and end around 9 p.m. Side note, I didn't live close to my high school like most people that went there. The drive would take at least 15 minutes max. Walking from my house to school would take an hour, and taking the bus would take 45 minutes. My brother at this time worked late hours, and so did my parents. So, my next best choice was the bus. The neighborhood wasn't the worst, but it also wasn't safe to be walking home at night as a girl. Even before this night, I was always a little on edge. So, I was saying goodbye to my friends and not wanting to bug them for a ride, I walked to my bus stop. I had my cell phone and started scrolling through Facebook. I would occasionally glance up and look at my surroundings. I noticed a car slowing down in front of my bus stop, but it immediately signaled to make a turn to my left. I didn't think much about it since there are houses behind that bus stop. It wasn't weird until I noticed this car doing that again and then again and again. I get scared easily and I am already a paranoid person, so this had my alarm bells ring. It wasn't until he had basically passed by me for the seventh time that he finally parked on the curb by my bus stop. That's when I got a look at him and took in his appearance. This happened a couple years ago, so my memory isn't great, but I do remember he was Hispanic and reminded me a bit of an uncle of a friend of mine. He spoke his first words to me that sent me panicking. To translate what he said to me in Spanish, it was basically him saying, "Hey, come over here. Do you need a ride? Hop in. I'll take you." He kept saying that for a good 5 minutes and then suddenly drove off. I then let out a breath I didn't know I was holding in. I was trying to calm myself down and tell myself it was over, but I knew it wasn't, and I was right. His car showed back up, and the thing about my bus stop is that there is a house behind it. Except before the house, there is a good amount of space with just dirt. Cars can actually go in this space, and I've seen it before. But for some reason, it shocked me to see him parked behind my bus stop. At this point, I was panicking and tears were falling down my cheeks rapidly. At this moment, I was already thinking I'll never see my family because this man was going to take me. I was frozen in place, so I already know in crucial moments like this, my reaction is to freeze. It wasn't to fight or flight. I still believe it was the prayers that I was saying that saved me. At this time, these two bogey guys were close by and were walking their pit bull on a leash. I am a sucker for dogs, but at this moment, I couldn't speak of moo. In my frozen state, I knew there was my only chance and I fought to get the words out. It was my only moment to save myself, and I'm so glad I spoke out. "Excuse me, please, can you guys stay with me? That man in the car right there won't leave me alone. I'm very scared. Please stand by my side." My words choked up and I was shaking at this point. The guys were kind-hearted and agreed. To come off more intimidating, they crossed their arms across their chest and flexed a bit. They stared down the man who at this point had his window up and began reversing. He drove off and the guys stayed with me till my bus came. At this time, it was 9:59 p.m. I know that some of you might ask, why didn't you go back to your high school? Well, at this point, no one was really there. Mostly everyone had been picked up. I had a cell phone, but no one was going to be able to pick me up. This was my only transportation, and that time I didn't know about Lyft and Uber. I'm not even sure it was a thing back then. Overall, I'm just happy to have been saved that day by the nice guys. I hope one day I can see the guys that stayed with me at the bus stop to thank them. Because of them, I am here and am able to share this story of mine. I'm still shaken up at the memory of it because of the scare it gave me. After that incident, I asked for a ride for the remainder of the season. Sometimes, even when you don't want to bug people with rides, it doesn't hurt to ask. It's better to be that annoying person than finding yourself in my situation. Stay safe when taking the bus at night. This incident happened about 2 weeks ago on a Sunday evening. After spending the whole day in the city, I was waiting for the bus to take me back home, which is located in a suburban area. Personally, I was never fond of staying in the city until dark because that is when strange people begin to lurk. Fortunately, there are always many people at the bus station, so I felt quite safe. As I was waiting in line for the bus, I saw an old man, somewhere in his 70s, standing on the side and glancing at me from time to time. He was dressed in what typical elders would wear, a pale yellow polo shirt and khaki pants. Initially, I didn't find it strange because it's not as if he was leering at me or something. Besides, he did not have a suspicious vibe about him. The bus finally arrived within a few minutes, and as the line began to move, I saw the same man suddenly get in line behind me. The seating in the bus is two seats on the left and right side, so two people can sit next to each other. I sat in an empty two-seater, and the old man instantly sat next to me. He kept his head down without ever raising it, and I noticed him slightly turning it to the left and glancing at my legs. I wore a dress which was above the knees that day, so I thought that he was just taking the joy of admiring my bare legs. I tried to ignore his highness staring at my legs and moved them towards the wall of the bus. Shortly, I felt his left leg touch my right leg. Mind you, my legs were away from his, so he set his legs apart far enough to touch mine. He eventually began to press the side of his body against mine and do this odd rubbing motion. He was trying to lean on me with so much pressure that I ended up being squeezed between his body and the bus wall. This was persistent throughout the bus ride, which was over an hour. That 1 hour felt like a very long time. I felt very uncomfortable because not only was he rubbing against my side of the body, he also would glance at my face from time to see if I was enjoying what he was doing. And once he would revert his eyes to my legs, I could see his disturbing smile in the window reflection. I didn't want to cause a big scene, so I did everything I could to prevent him from continuing. I pretended to talk on the phone, placing my bag on my lap, and even kicking his left leg. I managed to blurt out, "Excuse me, stop it," but that phrase came out as meek as a squeak of a mouse. None of the passengers ever noticed what has happened during this hour. When the bus arrived to its destination, the old man just got up and quickly walked off, never to be seen again. I wish I could have been more brave when it came to situations like this, but this is the first time this ever happened to me. I never told this to anyone, so I am sharing this on here. There are real creepy people out there, so I encourage everyone to please be aware of the surroundings and report their incidents. So, creepy old man who sat next to me on the bus, let's never meet again. Back when I was attending a university, I used to work on campus at one of the dining halls during the dinner shift. I lived in the next town over since it was cheaper to live in a crappy little apartment out of town than to live on campus in the dorms. But I didn't own a car, so I had to take the bus. One night, I had just gotten off a shift at work. My feet were killing me, and I was completely exhausted. As I slowly made my way to the bus stop, I noticed a man much older than me sitting on one of the two benches at the otherwise empty bus stop. I didn't pay too much attention to him. I simply sat down on the second bench and listened to some music while waiting for the bus to arrive. The first sign that things were starting to get weird was when I kept noticing out of the corner of my eye that he was staring at me. At first, I thought I might be imagining it, so I looked over and caught him quickly turning his head to look away. Okay, so he was staring at me. This wasn't completely out of the ordinary since being a young college girl seemed to gain me a bit of attention from older men. So like usual, I just ignored him. That was a mistake. Again, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him look at me, but instead of just staring this time, he got up and walked over to sit next to me instead. I continued listening to my music, hoping that he'd see the earbuds and take the hint that I wasn't interested in having a conversation. Instead, this man literally took the earbud out of my ear. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said as my head snapped to look at him in shock. I should have told him off for touching my things and demanded he leave me alone, but I was sort of frozen and didn't want to make him mad. Hi, I replied quietly. He started introducing himself as Mike and telling me that he lived in the area and it was always nice to see pretty girls like me at the university bus stop. He explained that he was a real man, unlike the boys I went to school with, and that I should go home with him that night. I was a shy, scared girl who had never had a man be as bold as this to my face. I say to my face because I have certainly gotten my fair share of unsolicited private pictures online by that point, but I digress. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that didn't stop Mike from continuing to explain to me all of the fun things he wanted to do with me at his place that night. He'd gotten into graphic detail. The things he described started out with basic things you expect and escalated to him asking if I liked being choked until I turned purple and passed out in bed. I wish there was anyone else at that bus stop, but there were just the two of us in the dark alone as I counted the seconds until the bus would arrive. Then, Mike took things to a different level of shocking by telling me, listen, the demons want me to ask for your phone number, and they say you should give it to me or you won't like what happens. He actually had the audacity to start stroking my hair. His hand was gentle, but I didn't want him touching me at all. This was shocking for a number of reasons. The demons, I wouldn't like what would happen. Why was he touching me? What the hell was this guy talking about? As though he could read my mind, Mike went on to explain, my therapist knows the demons are real. I told her about them and she says I'm not crazy and the demons are real. He laughed and then abruptly stopped. Now give me your phone number like they said, he demanded, and as his hand stroked my hair for the last time, he stopped and gripped the back of my neck, still gentle but even more terrifying. I was scared and obviously didn't want him to have my phone number, but he was taking out his phone and I knew that he was going to call the number I gave him to make sure I wasn't lying to him. And he still had his hand on the back of my neck, so I reluctantly gave him my real phone number. Stupid, I know. But I was right, and he immediately called to check. All I could think about was just not making this guy angry long enough to get away from him. Then I blocked his number. Thankfully, the bus came moments later. I sat down as close to the front of the bus near the bus driver as I possibly could, since the bus was basically empty. Mike decided to sit directly across from me. At this point, I had tried listening to music again, hoping that being on the bus and him having my phone number would signal to him the end of our conversation. However, he decided to reach over and unzip my sweatshirt, revealing my work shirt and the name tag, which I had unfortunately forgotten to remove in my haste to leave work that night. I hadn't told him my name yet. Abigail, what a beautiful name. Our daughter would be named Celeste. I shouldn't have been more shocked at this point, but I was. I had stopped listening to music again and zipped my sweatshirt back up, which made him laugh. You won't need that soon anyway, he said and winked at me, implying how he planned to undress me even further that night. At one stop, Mike tried to convince me to get out the bus with him. I told him no, that I was tired and just wanted to go home. So he said okay and stayed on the bus. I knew that had been his stop, so the fact that he was staying on the bus worried me. I was sure this meant that he was planning on coming home with me instead. Baby, Mike whispered to me. I tried to ignore him, but he repeated himself louder. Baby. He had the most unsettling smile on his face as I asked what. He laughed and told me, the demons say you smell nice. I was terrified and felt like I was going to throw up by the time my bus stop arrived. I lived in an apartment alone and didn't want him to know where I lived. Despite my body being exhausted and sore from work, adrenaline kicked in and I bolted out the bus and ran straight home. I made it inside and locked the door. I looked through the peephole and didn't see him, so I went to carefully peek out of my window and saw him standing near the bus stop looking around. He took out his phone and sure enough, I started getting a phone call from an unknown number since I hadn't saved his number. I ignored it. When he hung up, I started getting several texts asking where I'd gone, how he didn't like hide and seek, and how the demons just wanted to have fun, but I was being a little bitch about it. I was so scared because he knew which apartment building I lived in, where I worked, where I went to school, my phone number, and my name. The only good thing which made me feel slightly relieved was that he didn't know which specific apartment number I lived in. That's when he started yelling outside. There were no specific words said, just wordless yells of what I can only assume were frustration and anger. I blocked his number and kept all the lights in my apartment off as I cried with my back to the front door. Maybe I should have called the police, but my brain was so frazzled that I didn't even think of that until the next day. All I knew about him was that he was a mentally unstable man, probably named Mike, who hadn't actually done any physical harm to me, so I didn't think it was worth it. In hindsight, I know that I made a lot of stupid mistakes during this experience. I ended up moving away entirely at the end of that term of school for unrelated reasons, but until then, I switched to day shifts at work and was paranoid every night. Thankfully, I never saw the man again though. So, Mike, the scary guy from the bus stop who tried to follow me home, I never want to meet you or your demons ever again. In my 8th grade year, I moved in with a family member after my mother passed away, and this family member lived pretty far into the country. Because of this, I had to ride the school bus to my new school. I used to live in town before the move, so this was my first time on a bus, besides school field trips, but then there were other adults present. In the morning, there were only about 6 or 7 students on the bus, and I was the first person to be picked up and the last one to be dropped off after school. For the first few weeks of school, everything seemed fine. The students were quiet, everyone kept to themselves, headphones in and whatnot. Being the first to get on, I always headed straight to the back of the bus to avoid everyone. Not that I had an issue with anyone, I was just socially awkward, and the more people I could avoid talking to, the better. As for my bus driver, we can call him Tom. He seemed like a normal bus driver. He didn't say a word to anyone and just did his job. He began getting a little friendlier to me when he dropped me off since I was the last to get off, but it was never anything strange. It was a smile and a see you in the morning or have a nice night. Nothing I would ever suspect. Things continued like this for a while, nothing exciting happening until me, being a 15-year-old girl who had just lost her mother, decided to throw a giant tantrum and beg that I no longer wanted to live with this family member. I missed the more populated city, my old friends, and my old school. So, about 2 months into going to the school, I decided to move back home with another family member. This is where the story shifts. On the last week of my bus rides, I told Tom I would no longer be taking his bus anymore as I was homesick and moving back home. He asked me to sit up towards the front of the bus for the rest of the week so he could say goodbye better. I didn't think anything of it. He was a 40 to 50-year-old man who never gave me any red flags. Anyways, I listened and moved to the seat right behind him so he could look at me through the large mirror above him and we could chat. It all seemed innocent at first. He asked about my mother, why I was leaving, what I wanted to do when I grew up, and other things. The last few days of riding the bus, the questions got stranger, and I may have not been able to see the signs of a creep, but I knew the questions weren't things a middle-aged man should be asking a teenage girl. If anything, I thought he was just being nosy. He asked if I had a boyfriend, if I had my first kiss yet, and what an ideal date for me would be. I answered honestly, but with a weird feeling in my stomach. Gut feelings are 500% real. On my final day riding the bus, as I got on, Tom asked me if I would sit in the front again, but wait until everyone else was off the bus. I agreed, going back to my past seat in the back of the bus and waited until everyone got off. I moved to the seat behind him again, but this time he didn't say anything to me. At first, I probably should have mentioned earlier, but from the last stop before me and my stop, there was about a 25 to 30-minute driving distance. I'd say he didn't say a word to me for about 20 minutes at that time. I sat listening to my music until he pulled the bus over. We were on my road and I knew my family member's house was close ahead, yet he pulled over and stopped the bus. If I could explain to you the fear that ignited in me when the bus came to a halt and Tom turned in his chair so he was facing me with a smile on his face, I would. I had seen one too many movies with creepy men doing things they shouldn't be doing to teenage girls and expected the worst. I was expecting to be assaulted, harmed, kidnapped, or maybe even killed, but it never came to that. Instead, Tom told me to take my phone out and added his number to it. He said he would be here if I needed to talk about my mother, telling me the story of his own mother and things I can't really remember. I just remembered it being an innocent conversation, no matter how weird you might think it is for a bus driver to offer a teenager his number. He dropped me off after that and we said our goodbyes. Years passed and I was in 10th grade when I saw Tom again. I still had his number in my contacts, but I never contacted him. even when things got rough, because truly, what girl would call a strange bus driver when she needed help? Not me. I was at a Walmart with a few friends, and we decided to split up to get the things we individually needed. I headed off to get a box of Q-tips when I heard someone say my name. I could tell it was a male's voice, and I figured it would just be a male teacher I once had. It was Tom, but I couldn't tell at first. He had grown out his facial hair, and I honestly had just forgotten about him, but once he said hello to me, I remembered everything. I wasn't necessarily scared, I just found it odd that this man who was my bus driver for a few months remembered me after over 2 years. It was a simple conversation. He asked how I had been and how high school was going for me, and I answered, not really bothered to ask how he was. We said our goodbyes, and I met back up with my friend, explaining to them the whole story of Tom, to which they all found it scary that I never told anyone my bus driver gave me his number and asked me strange questions. I explained that I thought he was just being friendly, because I truly did. I haven't seen Tom in person since then. Years had gone by, I'm in college, and I thought the story was over then. Just some over-friendly bus driver. It could have stayed innocent, right? About a month ago, I was talking to someone I went to school with at the other school, and I mentioned to her how scared I was thinking about the bus out there because of Tom. She was shocked I had mentioned him and asked for the full story. I told her a summary of it, the questions, the stopping the bus to give me his number, and the encounter at Walmart. I told her he just gave me the creeps and I hoped I would never see him again. This was when I found out Tom had been arrested for sexually assaulting 2 minors. She not only showed me his mugshot, but told me what had happened. My story nearly lined up perfectly with these 2 other children. Bus driver who asked personal questions, offers his phone number and comfort to children with trauma and acted on it. The only difference was I got out of there. If I hadn't moved back to my hometown, I still wonder what could have happened to me. I'm extremely lucky that I never contacted his number and feel sorry for the 2 kids that did contact him, feeling they could trust this man. I know you're in jail, Tom, and aren't getting out for a while, but please, let's not meet again.